Hello, and welcome to the last instructional video of the Stitch the Season Fabric Workshop for 2023. This is where we'll create a belly band, the last prompt really in this series, and then we'll stitch all the pages together. We'll also stitch the pages to the spine to the book, and then seal the book with stitching around the cover and the back liner. Now, because we're doing that stitching, we want to stitch the ends over, we want to stitch the pages down. It's not a succinct video in that we're not going to create the belly band all at once. We're going to create it in stages and we'll jump around. So we'll create one part of the belly band, then we'll move and stitch the pages together, then we'll stitch the pages to the spine. So bear with me. If you need to, go back and re-watch parts of this video just to get everything succinct, or just do a little bit at a time. I wanted to create one video where you can just go back and refer to it instead of perusing through a dozen videos. So let's get started. To create our final closures and our belly band, we're going to be jumping around a lot. So we'll do a little bit for the belly band, some of the closures, and so on, because we want to line up the seams appropriately. The first thing we're going to start with is the belly band. Here are all our pages. They're not sewn together yet. They're just completely stitched. I have all my pins holding them in place. And these are the fabrics that we chose for the cover. So I have the cover unstitched, the batting, and then the cover lining for each of these. And I'll take them out and show you them a little more in depth, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where that belly band was going. Ideally, our pages are going to be sewn to the spine, and then our cover will cover them. And then we'll have the back area here. So if you chose to make a flap like I did, this flap will be wrapped around the book, but without it, it's just like a book here with a cover front and back. That backing on the inside is where our belly band's going to go. It's going to be a band from the top to the bottom where we can slide things in. And to prevent things from falling out, we're going to have another ribbon with a magnetic closure coming around here. So we're going to do a little bit of engineering to make this happen. There are a couple of things that are key for this. You want to make sure your measurements are accurate. You don't want your belly band page to be really off center. I mean, you have a little bit of window. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you still want to make an effort to make it in the right position. And you also want to make sure and double check that your pages, particularly the areas where you've pressed them in, are the right size. I can see here that mine are just a little off, so I'll work on making sure those are the right size. Now, to create these things, you'll need, what I'm going to use is a 3-inch piece of ribbon here. It's fairly strong ribbon. It's not the lightest ribbon. It's not the strongest either, but I like to use it because the edges are finished. If you don't want to use ribbon, you don't have ribbon or any of those things, you can take your fabric and create a band, stitching down the other side. And when I would do it, I would stitch it wrong sides together, stitch down the side, and then when you open it, you have even sides here. And that could be your belly band. But I find it's just easier to use the ribbon because of the finished edges. Now, my page here is 8 inches tall, so I have about 12 inches, maybe a little bit more. I think more is the way to go with this, because what we're going to do is fold over the ribbon and tuck it underneath that page liner. And that way it looks neat and it is secure. But before we stitch down that, we're going to create our magnetic closure. Now for our magnetic closure, when we have this belly band here, we will have this underneath it and over it. So it will really appear this way. And what I like to do, because this is just 1-inch ribbon, I'm going to double it up. I only need it to reach each other. So by that I mean if I double it up and I put it under my belly band, I only need the ribbon to attach to itself. There's not going to be a lot extra. We're not making a bow or anything. We're just making something to hold this in place. So I have my ribbon about 29 inches long. That's just what works for me. You can vary this. I'm going to clip a little bit off. Now for the magnets that you can use any type of magnets you have. just make sure that they fit. So this one doesn't really fit around my ribbon. It's just a little too large. I like to sew them in place just to anchor them inside the magnet. This one happens to come with a adhesive backing. I don't find that backing helpful with fabric. So I'm going to use these smaller magnets that I have here. It's the same procedure. There are 2 magnets and they just snap together. And they'll work even between the folds of the fabric. And that's all I need to have. So let's get started with making our backing first. So I'll set aside my ribbons and my magnet for now. So I'm going to set aside my pages just for a moment because I want to make sure that my fabric is accurate. So very briefly, I'm just going to go through the fabric so you can verify that you have the right pieces. We have our cover, the full length of our book when everything's folded together. I just have little clips holding the sides down. I have my batting, and I trimmed it a little shorter than I originally had it because I like to have the fabric at the edge, not the batting. And so I have the batting, a spine separated just by a little bit of room, my back cover batting, my other spine, and then my other piece of batting which goes to my flap. I could play around giving a little more room here. So once I'm happy with that positioning, I'd like to take a little glue stick and just add a little bit to the back of my batting pieces. This is a temporary hold, but it just holds it in place. I'll remove this pin and re-stick it from the top here. So I'll go through all the areas, just adding a little bit of glue to the back of this fabric. So from here, you can see I have a little bit of an edge around the perimeter of my work area. I can even trim this batting down a little bit. Don't want any batting to peek out. And then I have a little space, a little give between my little hinges here so that when I fold over the book, it's not going to wrinkle. So next I want to get my next level here of fabric. And this is my front piece. I'll just set it down here first. My spine, just to reinforce the spine, and my back panel. I like to put my spine down first, and I'll pin that in place. When I stitch my pages of the book in place, I'm going to stitch them to the spine and then stitch the spine to the background. Just making sure my fabric pages line up and they're at the right position and size. So right here at the end, I can see, I just want to press out this seam just a little bit so it matches up nicely. And I'll take a look all around and see if there's any other area that I want to do that with. So here I have my pages exactly where I want them. So now I want to just get a nice measurement of placement for my pages. And this will help me find the exact area I want to put my belly band. So I know I'm going to put my pages on the spine, and ultimately I'm going to sew through the center of all those pages. They're not there yet, so I'm not ready to sew them. I just want to make sure that I have the right placement for them. And that's the right placement. So again, I just make sure that I know it's going here. I can take my pen and just make a few lines just so that I know that's where the spine is going. And then I just want to make a line here to mark where the end of the pages are. And I'll do that on both sides. And on this side, I have that fold of the fabric, so I don't have to really mark it if I don't want to. That will be my mark. So now to start with the belly band. I know I'm going to put it here and here, about halfway between the ends that I marked down. So I'll just set that and eyeball it for now. Before I attach that though, I want to create my magnetic closure. So now to prepare my ribbon to make that magnetic closure, I've folded it in half and I'm going to pin it just with these clips. That way I'm not poking through the velvet ribbon unnecessarily. So I'll just clip it down every so often, and I'll top stitch along the top and the bottom of this all the way around. Now at the very ends, I'm only going to stitch through the bottom part. I'll leave the top part open because I want to be able to slip my magnet in there. I'm also going to stitch a vertical line so that it will fit that magnet and not give it a lot of room to move around. So I have my pin here, and I'll stitch a vertical line over here, and then I'll do the same thing over here. So now I've stitched my ribbon. This is the underside and the top side, and I have those two little areas that I can just drop in the magnets. I have my thread on a needle, so I can just hand stitch this closed, and now I just need to decide the formation that I want. Do I want it like this or like this? So I think I'll just put it like this, and I want to make sure my magnets line up appropriately. So this top magnet will go in here. I'll deposit that magnet in. Stitch around to close this up. Make sure that the magnet fits on the underside. There's one side where it repels and one side where it sticks. And I just want to make sure that it sticks appropriately. It's in the right formation. So I'll attach these magnets to this side, and then we'll come back and attach it to our page. So now I've stitched all my ribbon, I've stitched my magnets inside, and when I bring them together, they close. So now I want to figure out exactly where I want it on my page, which is right here. I'll open it up, and now I'm just going to pin it in place only to the bottom piece of this fabric, not through the batting. And now that's ready to be stitched. I'm just going to stitch it down from approximately 1/4 inch of the end here to 1/4 inch of the end over here. And that way I have a little bit of give here because it's got to fit over this ribbon. So that's ready to be stitched down. So now I've stitched it down into place just on that one layer. I want to just double check that my fabric is lined up nicely with the top and bottom layer, and just verify that I didn't mess up by inverting or twisting that ribbon. So the magnet is still intact and still works. It's not terribly strong, but it works beautifully. So now we have our belly band almost ready to go. The next stage will be to close the book. But before we close the book, we want to attach the pages to the spine and attach the closure to the front. And now we're going to finish our pages. We're going to stitch them together and add any page dangles that we'd like. Now, I have the pages here, and let me show you the process for this. So we know which pages go together. I took out all the fillers, the little candy canes and the trinkets. And so you'll take 2 pages, each page at a time, and you're going to stitch around the border. So before you stitch the pages together, you have to get out your page dangles and decide where you want to put them, if you want to put them in your book. And if that's the case, you find the page you want to put it on and just put the dangle in between those pages. And then decide how far you want your dangle to hang. Do you want it to peek out the book or just be inside the book? I like to go through my book one more time to make any changes that I want. I have this little dangle here. I have a pocket here, so I don't really want anything to obstruct going in and out of that pocket. I could put the dangle here on this page, but I have a lot of things here as well. So I'm not really sure. I know that was the intended purpose. I think I'll put it here. So I'll just place it, decide how far I want it to hang, remove that pin, maybe just like that, and I'm going to pin it in place. So the first thing I'll do is go through all of my pages, attaching any dangles that I want to add, and I'll just stitch them down up top here to one side of the page. So I stitched my dangle right to the page, right to the backing of that page. And now I'm just going to pin my 2 pages together and stitch around the top of it. can hand stitch or use a machine to stitch it. So now I've sewed all my pages individually together, and I just want to stack them the way they'll be inside the book. So now I want to pin the pages together, making sure that the center spine lines up. It's less important that the pages line up and more important that the center spine line up. So that looks pretty good. Clip these two, and these two, and so on. And now I'm just going to hand stitch a couple of places, just tacking those pages together right on that fold. So I'm making the spine here. Let me see if I can tuck this little bell inside so it's not quite so noisy. So this is just kind of a basting stitch. I'll come up from the outside so that I have my fold and stitch inside. And I'll just do that a couple of times. I'm trying to make all these pages as one unit. It just makes it easier to attach to the spine. So I'll knot that. And then I'll stitch it again over here. So now I'm going to keep my clips in for now, and now I want to stitch it to my spine. So now I'll bring the book structure over, and I can see where the spine is going to go. I have this all measured out from before, exactly where I want it. And now with my pen, I'm just going to really mark the center of that spine. Put something up here and down here, and a few X's. I won't be able to see them, but I can use them as my guide. And now I can remove that spine, pulling that pin out for now. So now I want those pages to go as close to that X as possible. I want the top and the bottom to line up neatly. And then I'll take my pin and put it through here. And I'll do the same thing down here. Now here's where you want to measure twice before you start sewing. I'm just flipping it over, verifying that it's straight. Both of my edges up top and bottom line up nicely. And now I'm going to take my pen again, and I'll take a ruler, and I just want to press down exactly where I want that line to go. This is my stitching line. So once I have that stitching line in place, I'll take my needle and thread, starting at the back here, and stitch that line. So now I've stitched the pages to the spine, and now I need to replace them back inside here. So I'm just moving this up, putting it down, adjusting it accordingly. I just want to make sure that those pages are in between those two areas. So I have this, and now this. Make sure the ends are tucked, and that looks pretty good. I'll pin that in place with additional pins. And I like to just do a check just to make sure that it lines up well and everything is in position. And then I'm going to go around the perimeter and just make sure that my ends meet up. The ends from both sides meet up. And I'm getting closer to getting ready to sew the pages down, but I'm not there yet. You can just close your book like this if you're making the flap, but I want to add a little tie. So let me show you what I do for that. Now you can use two little buttons and some thread, some string underneath them, and you'll attach the string to one side underneath, and you'll just wrap it around. You can use buttons that are particularly Christmas buttons. I'm just going to use white buttons here, and then I'm going to cover them just by, after I attach the buttons, gluing them down to my piece. And that way I have just a Christmas image for the buttons. These are just ornaments that I saved. You can see little holes designed for beading. So, but to do this, I want to do this before I stitch down my book. I'm going to mark where I want the buttons. Now my book is going to have filling in it, so my cover isn't going to close tightly, maybe to here. So I'll put a little X here where I want this button to go, and another one here where I want that one to go. And now I'm just going to stitch down the button with some needle and thread, both of them through only the top layer. I have everything pinned together, so I'll just remove this. So I'm only stitching through the top layer as well as the batting. And the same thing over here. I'll just stitch through the batting and the top layer to hold down my buttons. So now that I have my buttons attached, I can start getting ready to sew my piece together. So I want to stitch the spine to the liners first, not to the batting or the front cover. So I'll take my pin out and reattach just the spine as well as these liners to the cover, both front and back. So I'll just have to flip it over, make sure it's still lined up, but my pins are not going through the front cover. So I have it here. I'll set aside my belly band for now. And now I just want to remove the cover and the batting. Set this aside. And now I need to stitch down on both sides of the spine. So I'm stitched down on either side of the spine, and now I can attach my front cover and batting to the back. So I'll bring this over, place my front and back pieces together, and try and line them up. Now having the pages together adds a little bit of weight, so it pulls the fabric. So I just have to make sure it's in the right position. This will take a moment. Just take your time. Once you have it where you want it, I'm going to hold it down and pin everything into place. And I have my cover all pinned together with pins and clips here. So I'll stitch that down. Again, I'm always adjusting, constantly adjusting my work. I have this part all open so I can remove that little pressed seam and enhance it if I need longer fabric. But I want to make sure my cover lines up nicely. So that's the case. So I'll start sewing right around the perimeter, right from the inside here, all the way around to here. So I have my front stitched all the way around, and it's attached quite nicely. And now I need to stitch this side. And as you can see at the very end, the fabric pulled up a little just by moving it with the cover. That's totally normal. So now I'll just remove a little bit of this fabric and repress it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you're just going for a nice, neat edge. So once I have that, I'll just add a few clips in place. Wow. But now, before I sew this down, I want to put my belly band in place, finally. So I'll take my fabric and just sandwich it in, the ribbon of the belly band sandwiched underneath the cover and the liner. And I'm only going to do this on one side to start with. So once I have that lined up, I'll take some more pins. Now for here, I'm not sewing through the top. I'm flipping it over and top stitching along here. So I'm just going to put a couple of pins in there once I have it in the exact spot I want. And I'll start top stitching from here all the way around. When I get down to here, I'll show you what I have to do to make this bottom complete. And now I've stitched all the way around right to here. So I'll remove that pin, and now I'll place that belly band on the bottom in the exact place I want it. I want it to have a little bit of give so that I can hold my goodies, but not so much give that they're going to be so loose. So approximately there, I think that's a good amount. I'll feed this through that opening, and when I'm happy with the way it is, I'll make sure it's not pulling on either side, hold my hands on the inside, and pin it just a couple of places. The pins will overlap, but that's my goal because now I'm going to hand stitch it.
And I'm going to have to really play around with hand stitching it by pulling this around so that I can get in here. And I'm just going to hand stitch it across to here, and I can either finish it by hand stitching it to the very end, or I can stitch it with a machine to the very end. I just wanted to really point out that if you noticed, I did not stitch through that area of the spine. I wanted to make sure that it had give. So I'll finish stitching the bottom here by hand, and then we'll come back and look at it, and then we'll do some final details. So now I have everything stitched down. You can see from the outside here, my stitching all the way around the book. I have my 2 buttons here that I'm going to finish. And I like to go through the book just one more time to make sure I didn't leave any pins or anything in place. I have my magnetic closure. I can remove my clips from the pages. Make sure all my little pieces are intact. And now I can just finish up some things before we take a look at the final work. I found these little wooden shapes. This is just a little gingerbread man, and I'm going to glue it to the top of this magnetic closure. I just think that will be a cute little touch. So I'll take a little bit of fabric glue and attach that to there. And then I'll do the same thing with these 2 buttons. I'll take some fabric glue and attach them to each of the buttons that are held down here. Before I do that though, I want to take a string. This is maybe 14 inches long, and I knotted one end. You could feed some beads through there if you wanted. I'm going to leave mine plain. I'm just going to bring my string around one side. This happens to be this side here. It can be either side that you want. And I'm going to double knot it. So I knot it once, twice, and a final knot. And then I can just clip that excess. So now I have a little string closure for my book. I'll use glue to attach the ornaments to the top, and then in the next video we'll come back and look at the completed book full of all the goodies.
Whew, so that was a lot of work. That's how I complete the book and add the belly band in the back of the book. I like that feature because it lets me tuck in even more things. We have lots of pockets in this fabric book, but this gives me additional space to add more work. And I really like the closure of the book because it really secures it, especially for travel if I want to take it to a family member to show them my journal for the year. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and comment below. I really love to hear your feedback. And please post your work in our Facebook group. I really enjoy seeing all the beautiful work that's been posted already, and I can't wait to see more of it coming up. If you'd like additional footage and behind-the-scenes content, please consider becoming a paid member of my channel. And be sure to stay tuned for the month of December. I'll have lots of videos out for techniques where we can make little tags and ornaments and other things that you can put inside this journal. I'm sure you can come up with a few on your own as well. And once again, thanks for joining me today.